When a marriage begins to unravel, it can lead to unexpected revelations. Today, we'll dive into Arp's journey through a crumbling relationship, where he uncovers infidelity and ultimately finds solace amid emotional turmoil. The story centers on how his wife's actions pushed him to a breaking point, only for him to discover new possibilities after spelling out the word divorce and finding someone who treats him better. Hello, I'm a married man with 2 kids, aged 15 and 12. My wife, Kate, 41F, has been cheating on me for the past 14 to 15 months. It all began when she started her new job, where she met a friend, Dan, 43M. Initially, she described Dan as a helpful colleague who even trained her at work. I met him a few times while picking her up from the office, and he came across as a decent guy. At first, I had no reason to question their friendship, but soon, things started to change. In the beginning, Kate would just have lunch with Dan at work, which seemed normal. But over time, she began having dinners with him too, usually with excuses like, "We're working late," or "We just grabbed something to eat on the way home." Sometimes, she'd say the whole team went out, so she couldn't skip the dinner. However, regardless of the excuse, Dan was always present at these dinners. This made me, and even our kids, increasingly frustrated, as we would wait for her at home only to learn she had already eaten out. We tried everything to get her to reconsider this behavior. We confronted her, shared our concerns, and even gave her the cold shoulder, but she didn't seem to care. At that point, I didn't suspect an affair, but when she showed no regard for our complaints, I began to understand that there was more to it. I even tried to have an honest conversation with her, asking if she had fallen out of love or felt differently about our marriage. She brushed it off, claiming I was just overthinking. While her words were somewhat reassuring, her actions told a different story. I tried hard to uncover the truth, but hit a wall every time. Reading threads on how others caught their cheating partners made me realize that maybe I wasn't as clever as others, or maybe my wife was better at covering her tracks. I tried going through her phone and managed to see some of her chats, but nothing suspicious showed up, likely because those messages were deleted. Additionally, her phone had multiple layers of security, with separate passcodes for her gallery and social media accounts. I couldn't gather any evidence despite multiple attempts, and eventually, I gave up. Now, looking back, I see how others have used private investigators or tracking devices. But at the time, I didn't even think of those options. After 17 years of marriage, hiring a PI to follow my wife felt extreme. So, I let it go and shifted my focus to my own life and my kids. I'm sure Kate noticed my change in behavior, but she didn't say a word, as if she was okay with it. I began spending more time out of the house when she was home, even crashing on friends' couches overnight. In essence, we've just become co-parents to our children. My kids have been observing this shift. About a month ago, they began asking if we were headed for a divorce. I've dodged their questions or responded vaguely, but yesterday, their persistence wore me down. I told them that they are loved, and no matter what happens between mom and dad, they would always be cared for. My youngest quickly responded that if given a choice, he'd want to stay with me. It hit me then that perhaps it was time to make a decision instead of delaying things out of fear. I know my wife is cheating on me, yet I've been distancing myself from her rather than taking any concrete action. There's also another layer to all of this. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, I ran into an old college friend, Veronica, 42F. She had moved to Tokyo after her marriage, but a few years ago, her husband tragically passed away in an accident, prompting her to return to the States. She resumed her teaching job here. Veronica and I had a past. She was more than a friend to me back then. We were always together, often sharing subtle touches like hugs or brushes against each other. We were young and close, but I was too timid to ask her out, and she was focused on her master's degree. Seeing her again was like seeing a ghost, but our conversation felt natural, as if no time had passed. She was on her way home from work, and I had some free time, so I asked if she wanted to catch up over coffee. She agreed, and in that moment, I thought that maybe I should have done this years ago. Over coffee, she shared her story, revealing that she had no children, having endured 2 miscarriages. I felt immense sympathy for her, but she showed no pity for herself. She stood resilient and strong, despite all she had lost. We exchanged numbers and have stayed in touch ever since. After a few meetups, I shared my situation with her. She asked me why I was still holding on to a marriage that seemed to have reached its end. She's a firm believer in accepting reality and moving forward. I think her presence in my life is offering me a new perspective, which ultimately allowed me to talk to my children about the possibility of separation. Now, I'm facing a dilemma. At times, I feel like I'm also emotionally cheating on my wife. Since I confirmed her infidelity, I felt that our relationship was irreparably damaged. But I hadn't initiated any formal separation. Now, if I take that step, Kate might shift all the blame onto Veronica, which I want to avoid. Any advice on this would be appreciated. Update number 1. Thank you all for your comments. I know it's taken some time for me to update, but a lot has been happening. Let me break it down step by step. After my initial post, I took some time to reflect and realized that the sooner I moved on, the better it would be for both me and my children. Although it's a bit late, it's not beyond repair. So, one evening, when my kids were headed to a friend's place for a sleepover, I decided to talk things over with Kate. After dropping off the kids, I returned home, and Kate was in the bedroom. I knocked and asked if she could spare a few minutes to discuss something important. It's been a year since I moved to the guest bedroom after a major argument, and she's never made any attempt to mend things. She came out of the bedroom, and I went straight to the point, telling her I was filing for divorce and that we needed to inform our kids about the separation. I expected her to agree and for us to move forward, but her reaction completely threw me off. She looked at me in shock, asking, "Why now? What's changed all of a sudden? Did you find someone else?" She then quickly followed up with, "Oh, you found someone, didn't you?" I gave her a look and told her to stop pretending, saying, "You know exactly what you've been doing. I know about your affair with Dan, so there's no need to act surprised. This should be liberating for you too, as now you're free to have a guilt-free relationship with him." She froze, looking shocked, as if thinking, how could he know this? She then fell silent before breaking down in tears. She said it was never supposed to turn into an affair, explaining that it started as a fling, perhaps a way to cope with what she called a midlife crisis, and a temporary escape from stress. She insisted she couldn't imagine her life without me and our children. I replied that flings don't usually last over a year and that if she truly valued our marriage, she wouldn't have let me sleep in the guest bedroom for all these months, distancing herself not only from me but from our kids. She kept apologizing, saying she knew she had made a horrible mistake and should have ended it the moment she realized how wrong it was. She swore she had no real connection with Dan, repeating, "It was just a fling, nothing more." I told her it was too late now. If she truly wanted to fix things, she should have done so a year ago. We went back and forth until midnight, with her breaking down repeatedly, pleading, and promising to fix things. Realizing that we wouldn't get anywhere that night, I decided to call her aunt, who she's very close to. Her aunt sensed the urgency and arrived within 20 minutes. Kate herself confessed everything to her aunt, which led to another few hours of similar conversation. Her aunt tried to talk me out of it, but I was already mentally checked out from the marriage. I explained that Kate's distance had created deep resentment in me, and now I no longer loved her. She wasn't the woman I married. Her aunt eventually took her with her, as Kate was in no state to talk to our kids the next day. When the kids returned home, I told them that their mom was staying with her aunt for a few days. They seemed to understand the situation. About a week later, Kate's aunt called and asked me to bring the kids to her place to discuss the separation. She had been in regular contact with me all week, updating me on Kate's declining physical and emotional health and urging me to reconsider the divorce. I drove over with the kids, and as soon as we started discussing the separation, the kids said they had seen this coming and were glad we were finally being open about it. We reassured them of our love and reminded them that they would always be our priority. I was surprised at how maturely they took the news. I suggested an amicable divorce to avoid unnecessary lawyer fees, as we didn't have any major assets to dispute. We agreed to split the joint account and other shared assets evenly, and as the children were old enough to decide whom they wanted to live with, there would be no custody battles. Despite this, Kate kept asking if we could try again, saying she had already left her job and cut off all ties with Dan. I made it clear that reconciliation was not an option. So, our divorce proceedings are now underway, and we'll have shared custody of the children. As for Veronica, many of you advised against jumping into another relationship right away, and I agree. Veronica feels the same and thinks it's best to let things settle post-divorce before considering any future together. She has no desire to be seen as a homewrecker, and her stance makes sense. We're still in touch over messages and calls but have avoided meeting up in person. I want to finalize the divorce and ensure I'm not just using Veronica as a rebound. At present, my children are staying with me in our house while Kate remains at her aunt's until she figures out her next steps. Her crying spells continue, and she's now seeking therapy, though I'm uncertain how much it's helping. I do feel some sympathy for her, but there's nothing more I can do. The ship has sailed. Thank you for reading, and thanks for joining us today. Please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. We'd hate for you to miss out on new content. Until next time.